The clubhouse that we're sitting in right now, as I said, was probably one of the two most visible landmarks in Giles County. Is not the original clubhouse. The original clubhouse was some distance from here, and it burned on Christmas Day, the day that a year after the farm opened. And this clubhouse was built and opened in 1934. Now, the idea behind the clubhouse is that it was for people to come, to stay, to visit, to pass through, to have friends here. The Mars family lived here when they were in the state of Tennessee, but they didn't live here on a daily basis. Their home was in River Forest, Illinois, and Ms. Mars did a lot of traveling. But when Mr. Mars died in April of 1934, it brought a big change into Milky Way Farm. As I have already alluded to in the first segment, the first cattle that were here were shorthorn cattle. The second group of cattle were brought in by Allen Feeney, who was the man who married Ms. Mars's daughter, Patty. And after they married, he was in the horned Hereford business, and he brought horned Hereford cattle in here. Mr. Mars was a big fan of gaited horses and road horses. He was not a fan of the thoroughbred horses. Ms. Mars had, right before Mr. Mars's death, had bought 100 thoroughbred colts in Kentucky. But when Mr. Mars died in April of 1934, then changes started to take place. The first thing that was done was that there was a mausoleum built, started in August of 1934, on the hill that Mr. Mars had picked out where he wanted to be buried. Well, of course, he didn't know that he was going to die, but he knew that someday that he was going to die, and he wanted that particular spot where the mausoleum would be. That mausoleum was made out of limestone rock that was quarried on this farm, but the outside of it was in granite, and the granite was quarried in North Carolina. But there was 5 grave spots inside the mausoleum, and he had planned for his whole family to be buried there. He was really thinking far ahead when he had that registered as a cemetery, because he didn't want anybody to be able to come and close that area where he was going to be buried. Now, he didn't know there was going to be a mausoleum built, but Ms. Mars wanted to pay that kind of tribute to him because she loved him that much and she thought he was that important a person. And they did build that mausoleum, and it took from August till November to finish it. Then Ms. Mars moved that mausoleum in 1943 to River Forest, Illinois, and then they were buried eventually in Minnesota. But the first place that mausoleum was moved to was River Forest, Illinois, but it's now in Minnesota. Now, Mr. Mars loved that view from that mausoleum because you could even see it from the road out there. But it gave him a feeling of love, of warmth, of freedom, and that's where he wanted to be buried, and that's where he was buried. But then his body was exhumed and put into the mausoleum.